Hi, I'm Tyson.
I'm Colin.
I'm Ryan.
And I'm Adam.
And we're the Gamesmiths, and just got done playing yesterday's War, and we want to talk to you a little bit about our experience with it and some of the things that we noticed that we liked and some of the things that we noticed that we would like to work on a little bit. I'm going to throw it over to Adam. He's got some thoughts.
Thanks, Tyson. I really enjoyed the game. I feel like I was positioned in a very good place to win from the start, and I think maybe goes into some of our feedback at the end. But from my perspective, I really enjoyed the game. I liked the theme. I liked the art even. Or at least where the art was going. I liked going out and looking for objectives. I liked the concept of running into raiders. I liked not only the objectives were the
blue
big
ones,
flags,
the
what were
contracts.
I like going out for contracts, and I liked the extra layer of objectives, so you're kind of trying to fulfill the contracts to fulfill the objectives. I like the multi-layer there. I like the concept of the wasteland. I never went there or even thought about going there, but I like the concept of the wasteland. So I think the game presented itself really well. I liked your opening statement. The story was great.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of people overlook that and how valuable it is. So from the start,
And it doesn't have to be a lot. There was only like a paragraph or two,
Right.
but it really did like set the stage for like, this is what we're doing.
Context is what you're doing.
It's that nice Star Wars scroll
Right.
before the game starts. You know, you're just
well,
like,
and a good objective statement, even if the game suffers, a good objective statement will take you way into a game because you're still on that high of coming in excited about playing the game. And a bad objective statement, even if it's a good game, you kind of still take that ramp up to where I
Right.
wasn't engaged till halfway through the game because I was thrown off by the lack of objective statement or a poor objective statement. So I think getting the objective statement right, which I think you did a really good job on, really helps carry people into the game and start you with a lot of momentum. So I think overall, the presentation, the theme, the idea, the way you've communicated that idea was very good, and it got me into the game. And I think the rest of the guys felt that
Yeah, it
same
was very
way
strong.
too.
it
We're
was.
very excited to
It looked
jump
very
into the
clean
game.
the way the board was set up. I had an idea of what I was trying to do. It seemed like there was multiple strategies
Yeah.
based on the characters that were there. I was going for as many different contracts as I could because they were cheaper. I could see that there was counter strategies and
Well, and what you were saying, I thought the presentation was really nice as well, that it is clear, it is clean. I knew what I was looking at, I knew where I was looking at, so like the iconography and the general user experience that I was having was very clean.
Right.
And
I
it
couldn't
was,
remember it was metal versus steel, but other than,
other than
that,
that.
that iconography just befuddled me for some reason.
But it was the same essential thing.
It
so
was,
It wasn't
yeah,
at least
no,
like you were
I
doing
got
lumber
there.
or
I got
something,
there,
right?
right?
yeah,
Yeah.
the
I didn't
currencies,
ever say wood.
the money, the energy, and the metal. It was very simple, easy to understand. Anybody could do it on the first try.
I would lose the E from the E credits.
Yeah, I
I
might
felt
do
that
that.
was a little.
Yeah.
Just 3 credits is
Yeah,
fine.
just
I felt
credit,
the
yeah.
E was just a little clumsy. And it
I
did,
felt that as
especially
well.
with the energy. When I was looking
Yeah,
at like
that's
the when you're looking at like the Raider reward cards, and you're just like 3 E, okay, 3 energy, and then 2 lightning bolt. Oh right, E is money, lightning bolt's energy.
That's a
Oh,
great
yeah,
point.
I didn't
That
That threw me off a
definitely
couple
threw
times,
me
too.
off a couple
It
times.
didn't throw me
like,
off,
quick
but
math.
I can easily see how that anybody could get thrown off by
That
that
one got
in
me, too.
any, yeah.
So that
Yeah.
definitely.
Was
so
that explained what even E means?
it means Elysium credits.
Oh, Elysium.
The
Oh,
city.
okay.
So yeah, they did
Yeah.
stand for Elysium
Yeah, I
credits. So they
forgot
did
about
like
that.
yeah, it wasn't
Yeah.
bad, but just ultimately the only thing about like the iconography I found confusing.
That's a fair point, yeah.
But overall, yeah, everything was great. It all made sense.
There was
Yeah,
a
that was
couple of
crisp.
There was as an experience from a gameplay point, I knew that I was behind Adam the whole time, and at one point, Colin and I were tied with like 15 points from our non-objectives, and I was feeling like the game was pretty tight in score for the most part. I mean, Ryan, you were a little bit behind for a lot of the
Right.
game, but you started to accrue a lot at one point, and so for a while, I did feel like we were all pretty close in it. And then it started to kind of drift away, and it was just kind of down to me and Adam, it felt like. But I still didn't feel like, from my perspective, like I didn't have a chance. But I know that not everybody had that experience. I felt like I was still in the game, even though I knew I was behind.
Well, yeah, I don't feel like you need to really hide the objectives. Everyone sees how many points they're worth and how much you get.
Yeah, that's a good
that
point.
hidden information doesn't really matter, and then it makes it harder. Like I accidentally,
'Cause
I think I scored 5
yeah.
extra points first.
When you took your first.
Yeah, I
Right.
think that's what I did,
Right.
and that's why we ended up tied. But I don't think we were. I think
Okay.
I can't remember if I did
Yeah.
that, but I think that that's what happened. So just it didn't really add anything to have hidden information when
Right,
everyone
and it-
already had seen how much the points and victory points
Right.
were.
It wasn't truly hidden information. At that point, it was a memory test.
Sure.
And so it wasn't, and that's never, unless that's the point of your game, that's never a lot of fun for people, and it doesn't really add a lot to the game. I've always gone by the advice that if something is public knowledge in a game, it should be as public and clear to everybody as possible. And so the reality of it is that those points that are taken are public knowledge for the most part, that just go from being clear public knowledge to murky public knowledge.
And it did feel a little bit fiddly, or like I felt like it was kind of awkward to be like, okay, everybody sees me taking this 4. Now nobody knows I had a 4. And I think
Right.
we even made a couple jokes about
Right,
that.
and we knew.
I don't know what your 4 is. I don't know what your 6 is.
Forget about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, it does feel a little clumsy in that sense. And if it is going to be hidden, I could see it being more like you're incentivized not by the points on the objectives, but rather by the conditions of the objectives. And that's not the case in this game, and I don't think it should be the situation.
Right.
But that would be how I would feel having a hidden thing, is like, oh, I achieved this, now flip this side over that nobody saw, and oh, that's how many I get. Nobody knows.
Yeah,
Right.
So overall, we felt the game presented itself extremely well. There was a few places where it was a little confusing in the way it presented itself, but I think A for me on how it presented itself for sure. I think once we got into the game, we noticed a few things that didn't deliver quite on the way that we thought it was presented, and we'll let Ryan jump into some of those
Yeah.
main categories.
So we had, I think, 3 main points that we wanted to touch on where we feel that this could use a little bit of improvement. Number 1 is the wasteland mechanic. I don't necessarily know that there is anything wrong with it or anything right with it because nobody used it. I only used it at the end when I had to fulfill that win condition. I didn't really do it for any other purposes than fulfilling that objective. And after reading your opening statement and looking at this game and laying it all out, it seemed to me like exploring the wastes to collect energy and metal would be your, would be the main point of the game. That the focus of the game would be sending your mechs in there, kind of pressing your luck, deciding how long they should stay out there and salvage, when they need to come back to help fulfill a contract because you maybe have a contract that requires 3 mechs, so you have 2 mechs fulfilling contracts and 2 mechs out in the waste, and then you kind of pull a mech out of the waste to fulfill a really good contract, and that just never came to fruition. There were too many other ways to get resources in the game to make that wasteland feel important. And just with the way that you presented the game and the way that I wanted to play the game, I wanted that wasteland to be the most important part of the game. I wanted all 6 of those wasteland slots filled and us fighting over them. And me deciding if I pull back this mech to fulfill this contract, Adam, who's only had 1 mech in the wasteland and has been dying to get another one in, is going to put that one in there. And now I'm balancing my opportunity to salvage with my opportunity to fulfill a contract. And I don't think that ever happened, and I thought that should be a bigger part of the game.
Yeah,
I was excited to roll the die too. Like
Right, I think
whenever
we
you
only
see
roll
a
the die
die
like
there,
2
you're
or
like,
3 times
"Ooh,
all game."
are you gonna get caught up? Like,
Well, and I did like that the die was that 1 to 3 is good.
Yeah.
I did
and
think that
4
was
to
great.
6
I
is
thought,
bad.
yeah, I thought
Yeah,
that
I love
material
that.
And it was
really
varied.
clean, actually,
Yeah.
for a way of doing that.
Well, and it gives you up to 3,
Yeah.
so the
yeah,
3
it
is the
limits
best,
points,
which is great.
But it
So-
gives you more than just like a 50-50 coin flip. There's 50%
Yeah.
bad,
And
you know,
then
50% good,
a
little
sixth
bit more
of it
better.
is
Right.
really great.
Right,
but
yeah.
I wanted to touch back on one of the things that you said that the Wasteland had was one method to obtain resources and not the main method.
Right.
And if I remember correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, I count 4 ways that you can get resources, and Wasteland is never the best way to do that, I think. The first way I can think of is that claiming a contract in the top right will automatically give you a resource, right?
Something, yes.
Something, and
A
it's
victory
a
point or a
fair
resource.
amount usually, and it's not chance-based like the Wasteland. So
Right.
you know what you're getting when you go into it. Then the next one I can think of is you've got the raiders. So committing to a raider and doing that guarantees you the resources there, and so you'll get resources that way. Another way that I can think of is the trading. So like the
Exchange. I would say
exchange.
Wasteland's definitely better than the exchange.
Yeah,
you have
it
3
probably
energy
is.
to get
You're
1
right.
steel,
But it's
as
still
opposed to just
chance,
getting
as opposed to
1 steel and.
But you also
But
have
you
to use
trap
a
your
mech,
mech.
and
Yeah.
you could lose your mech, and so
Right.
there
You
it's,
get
it's
the
right
bonus,
there,
but you
right?
get the bonus of 1 credit for even having your mech in the Wasteland too. So you're talking
There's
1
5.
credit and at least 1.
And then the
slot.
other one I'm thinking
There's
is
5
awards,
completing the contract.
and then completing the
contracts.
contract. Yeah, so there's
Awards
5 ways.
don't
We're going
give
to
you-
the Wasteland.
Awards give you
Oh,
a
awards.
resource.
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Yes, awards. I
rewards.
was thinking contracts.
But
yeah.
that doesn't happen until
Or I
partway
was
through the
thinking
game.
objectives, yes.
So,
Yeah.
but yeah.
Uh-huh.
So I see that as when there are so many alternative methods to obtain the resources, as opposed to the way that it seems the whole business is built on.
theme,
That you've got these mechs that go in Savage, and you've taken these mechs on loan from a corporation, and so this corporation probably have. If you're loaning or renting out these mechs, they're probably good and they
Right.
can gather a lot, but I didn't feel like they could gather a lot.
Right, I
comparatively.
didn't feel like they were gathering anything. I was just getting. I
battle
felt they were
mechs,
just
really.
another. Well, that or they were just another resource. In that, like, I just have to have 2 mechs on this. I don't have to send 2 mechs out to the Wasteland to fulfill this contract.
Yeah.
I just have to put 2 mechs on this contract because this contract needs 2 mechs.
That's
for
how
some
I
reason.
felt about it.
And it didn't seem like, I get thematically, you can send some mechs out in the Wasteland, gather some stuff, and then you have to send a mech or 2 back home with the stuff, you know, in its backpack or whatever to deliver it and get paid on your contracts. And so that all thematically made sense, but I felt like I should have been making the choice to pull guys out of collecting and now give them over to delivering.
So-
but I was never going to fulfill a contract
Yeah.
with 4, you know, so.
So then to recap,
I was
though,
trying. I did one.
Yeah, that's true.
and it took 2 turns.
it took you a while, yeah. But so the Wasteland mechanic is not necessarily. We don't know whether or not that's concerning. We just know that the Wasteland itself, we didn't
want
feel
it
the
being
incentive
used
to go
more.
to. So the problem is not. We're not necessarily suggesting change the Wasteland mechanics, but that could be part of
Right.
it. However, as far as the problem goes, we're not feeling the tie-in to the Wasteland as well as we'd want
you're-
to.
you're-
Incentivize it some
Yeah,
way.
your presentation that we love so much made me want to go explore the Wasteland. But playing the game, it became very obvious very quickly that that was probably never going to be my best decision. And so if I wanted to do it for funsies, I could, but the game was so tight, I didn't feel like I had just a turn to roll the
Spare,
dice to
yeah.
see
Well, and
what
you
happened.
only have 2 mechs that you could even choose to make a decision. So it's like, do I
Right.
want to go complete a contract, or do I want to go to the Wasteland and get one?
Right.
And that
one
seemed
of
like-
the
and
3.
I think this kind of transitions
Yeah.
into our next issue, which was the Raider in how the Wasteland felt underpowered, the Raiders felt overpowered. Looking through the game, there didn't seem to be any better decision that you could make than fighting Raiders. If the Raiders came out, there didn't seem anything that you could do in a single turn using only 2 mechs that would net you as much income as fighting any of the Raiders. And on the flip side, there didn't seem to be anything worse you could do than to take that penalty. There was nothing you could do with your turn that was going to get you so much profit that it would negate the penalty of fighting the Raiders. Which puts you in a position of, especially once you have someone that gets out to an early lead, then all they have to do to protect their lead is go to the Raiders and fight the Raiders, because now the guy that's in the lead is going to get the Raider bonus, and if I don't take that too, the gap just gets wider.
Widens, yeah.
And that removes interesting decisions for me to make. Now it's just following the leader. I don't have any other option than to take the raider and just take a turn off and take the raider. And
Well, and as the leader, it was my strategy to release as many raiders as possible.
Right.
Because that kept me netting with the same with everyone else. It kept it
Them
pretty much
just- us
washed. We all had the
distracted
same
from our
victory
stuff.
points, the same everything, and it
uses
didn't
an
let
entire
anyone.
round.
Right.
An entire round. I probably 4 or 5 times,
Right.
where you have to go to Raider. If you don't go to Raider, you lose. And I tried not to, just because I was like, my character is trying to go after objectives, or he's
Right.
trying to go after contracts, and I'm unable to do that because I'm being pulled into the Raiders every time, and it was just
Well, I think it was more penalizing to Colin than the rest of us in a lot of ways because of that, because of Jack Harris's ability. Because I think there was a turn or two that both Ryan and I were like, well, I'll put 1 on there, right? And so like,
And see how that
and
works,
see if it works. Because it was, yeah, I don't gain the reward, but I can work towards this future contract or future objective. But I don't think that Colin ever had the situation where it was advantageous for him to just put the 1 on.
yeah, because you're netting 2 money every turn no matter what, so you're getting something. Unless I complete the contract for cheaper,
Right.
I don't get anything special. So I have to either go and keep up with these guys, keep getting the same amount of points, just having a wash and watching them being able to use their mechs in other ways, or their powers
or
in other
their
ways.
extra money that
their
they
extra
have.
monies
Yeah.
to buy the stuff they need, or I can try to go for contracts and hope that works out to give me extra points, but it's never going to add up to as much as a Raider is going to give me, and the penalty was just detrimental. If you don't do that, you
It just ruins
lose
you, yeah.
everything, and then you're just going to be out, because I think some of the penalties for victory points are like -5, so it's like you can't take a -5
Right.
unless it's turn 1
Right.
and you have no victory points in the first place.
Right.
Well, and then
But
the
even then, you just lose all your resources, and now you're not going to be able to complete contracts. So what's the point?
Well, and
Yes.
then you pull in the thematic tie, like the Wasteland type of thing. Is with the Raider specifically, to beat a Raider, you send 2 mechs to kind of fight it off, and I'm not sure, is that warding it off or is that
Right.
barricading against them?
Well, because
or
they
whatever,
leave no
yeah.
matter what. If nobody fights them, the Raiders
They're
still
not going to do
gone.
it. Yeah,
And the other,
Oh, I was just going to say
Yeah.
that on top of that, it makes like maybe it leaves the other people undefended, and maybe that's the idea. But to me, it felt like what I was thinking as I was playing, rather than thinking through that, was I'm putting them to fight them off. So I'm going and actively doing something against them. But if I'm doing that and everybody's doing that, then I only need to do it 2, and it fights them off and scares them away.
Yeah, it's
but
that
everybody else
overkill.
gets
It seems
killed,
like
right?
overkill,
So
right?
it felt like
right.
if 2 can do it, why
do
does
we need
everybody else
8?
have to do theirs as
Right.
well?
And it
Why
also
does everyone
just-
get the same amount of resources if we're all
Right,
going-
if we're all-
And to be blunt, the combat was just very boring.
Yeah.
There was no chance I'd lose or chance I just decide, do I want to win this, do I want to tie this, or want to lose this? That's not interesting combat to me. I want to at least roll a die and see, on a 6 something
Well, the
different
combat doesn't have
happens,
to be
or-
interesting, but something
Like-
around it has to be
Right,
interesting.
right.
Do I even place them there?
Right, and there
Is that
was just
interesting?
no.
But
there was
nothing around the Raider was
I never
interesting.
looked
That's
at
the
it
big
and
problem.
saying, "Here comes the Raider. Do I push my luck, stay in the wasteland, and possibly just earn more than the Raider can steal from me?" Nope, that's never going to
By a
happen.
roll of the dice.
Right, by a roll of the dice. So there's just never the Raiders show up. Everybody has to go there and do that, and so you have I think you're kind of in between 2 games here, where if the Raiders are more important, you have a game that is very kind of solvable. It's not a press your luck game. It's just an arithmetic game. It's a do the math and what is
simple
my
battle
right,
game,
and it's very straightforward. But if the crux of the game relies on the wasteland, then this whole thing becomes a press your luck game, which I find much more interesting because the combat you don't have a you have a you I think you have the infrastructure that you've built for this game supports a press your luck mechanic better than it does a combat mechanic. If you're going to do a combat mechanic, then make it a deck builder, make it legendary. Give me cards to fight the things in here and make the fighting interesting. But that's not what you were trying to do.
Right.
You were trying to make me press my luck in the wasteland to try and fulfill these dangerous contracts to earn myself, corporate fame and respect and go out there and impress my bosses. And I didn't feel like, I just felt how powerful the Raiders were and how just cut and dry. You look at that and you say, okay, this is the reward I get. Now you can just start mathing everything out, as opposed to, okay, if I spend this turn in the wasteland and I roll a 3, I'm in good shape. If I roll a 1, I'm in trouble.
Right. And I think there's a couple of ways that we think you could solve for this, but I want to highlight first, before we go into like any potential solutions, the fact that the problem with this specifically is not it's that the Raiders are overpowered in either direction. So they're overpowered in how much rewards they give, and they're overpowered in the penalties they give. So the problem that needs to be solved there is nerf those and make it more balancing and turn it back towards the wasteland in a lot of ways.
And I would add that in a 4-player, there's just too many. The chances that you're going to have one out on the board with 5 contracts or 5 slots open for contracts,
It's 1 in 5,
the
I
odds, the odds that there's going to be a Raider on the board is almost every turn.
Right.
Yeah, it's pretty. So
Especially
that
if
a
somebody
sweep
wipes off the
is almost
contracts
gonna
like Adam
guarantee.
was doing, you're going
Yeah.
to get one. You're going to get one.
And then
Something we
there's
talked
that
about
turn.
thematically is why is it also attacking all of our corporate base or our bases
Right.
Yeah.
when there's a Raider there. I think it would be more thematic if the Raiders one, you drive everyone to the wasteland. 2, those Raiders attack in the wasteland when you're out of your base and you're vulnerable. You're out there and they're trying to steal from you. And I think we have a few ideas on how to make that more interesting. I think something that could even make the Raiders more interesting is if they're weak and not worth fighting at the start, and they just take little bits from you. But as they accumulate those bits, those
become
resources
more
stay
powerful.
on the Raider. So at some point, you want to waste your mechs to go fight that Raider, because
Right.
every time they steal an energy from me, it's sitting on them.
Then they
s-
become more valuable. to
yeah,
kill.
and every time they steal from us, they become more valuable because they're holding all this loot, and then people go and kill them, and they either split the loot or.
Right, or end up in a situation
off.
like the
But
Raider
then there's an
almost
interesting
becomes
choice. Do I
Right.
fight him yet, or I?
well, and the Raider almost
Yeah.
becomes an objective then. Then the Raider starts building up points, and now you have this like 6th objective on the table. Yeah, I like
then
that.
there's a loot card, and every time it loots, it goes back to this one Raider.
Right.
And he loots everyone who's in the wasteland, and at some point you can just go fight the thing.
Right.
Because you're like, all right, this is
Or you-
enough's enough.
yeah, you
but
can
he's
have-
small. He's like picking at you, so you're not.
Yeah.
Or
Not
whatever,
worried
but-
until later.
Right.
in
We
on,
just
right.
think the Raider needs work.
One of the
and
thoughts I
here's some
had.
ideas, but
Yeah, one of the thoughts I had specifically is I would like, and so there's a couple of things that would need to happen within this, and you wouldn't have to change much with the game, except this could all affect balancing, and we don't know how much or how little balancing has been done, and I'm sure that you are far more aware of that. So take all of these solutions with a grain of salt. But I would love to see. What Ryan was saying a little bit more of. I like the push your luck mechanics. I think that the game lends itself, like you were saying, to the idea of, do I do this or do I do that? And see, this one should theoretically get me a safe amount of stuff, but this will get me a better thing, potentially, if I can pull it off. And that's kind of what I wanted. And so I wanted the first player token to rotate.
Yeah,
I wanted
would
to
like
have,
that too.
I wanted to have a little bit of rotating of that. And in relation to how that works with the Raiders is I want to limit those Raiders to, there are 8 spaces for mechs on the Raiders. I want to limit that to maybe 3. And they could maybe change per Raider. So each Raider is maybe a little different and has different requirements to fulfill,
Yeah.
right? Or to fend off or whatever. And you can say that, say Ryan has the first player token and he really wants to finish his objective that he's working on. And he knows that if he goes and places his on his objectives, that me, Colin, and Adam have to pick up his slack in fulfilling that. And so I like the idea of going in and maybe saying, okay, Ryan's not going to do it, and then it comes to me and I have to make the decision, well, I know that if something bad happens, it's going to affect us all, and that would have to be the requirement with the Raiders still. It would have to affect everybody, but I can still say, well, Colin may not do this because he's not ready on that objective. But what I want to do is make it so that I make that decision of, oh, am I going to push my luck and determine whether or not Colin and Adam are going to make sure to fend off these raiders, because if not, it hurts me.
Yeah, I think. Oh, go ahead.
And then, like as far as the rotating first player, it would also solve the problem where, for instance, Adam was in the lead, so he could rotate. He was the last player, so because he was the last player, he was able
Yeah, that
to
was helpful.
spend 5.
See what everybody else did.
See what everybody else did.
Spend
Yeah,
5, make everyone
sweep
change
the
their
board
turn.
and then get
I didn't
raiders
realize
out
that. That was nice.
all across the board.
Yeah.
So if it had been his turn first, he wouldn't be able to do that necessarily.
Right.
And then I would have the last choice to be able to say, okay, no raiders are out, none are going to come out, and I can complete my objective. And I was just completely
Absolutely.
That's a good point.
Handicapped
blocked from
because of
doing
that.
Yeah,
Every
there was
turn I
no.
got to choose.
Yeah,
Yeah. I
That-
didn't
that was
notice
one-
that, but
something
that's-
that
That
was
a-hole in the
frustrated
Price
about
is
that.
Right that goes $1,701, Bob.
Yeah, right.
What was the highest bid? And $1. So I think just a nutshell. Sorry, I think just a nutshell. Kind of what I'm talking about here. I think this game would be at its best if rolling a 3 in the Wasteland is the best thing that you can do. That getting 3, putting your mech in the Wasteland, getting 3 of a resource and the money for it is the most profitable thing you can do on your turn. So that pressure luck mechanic is always present, and you can go, man, I need something this turn. I have to go to the Wasteland, and I gotta hit a 3. That, I think, is this game at its best.
Yeah, and
Or at least it's balanced.
Right when the rules were read, I never would have thought worker placement for this, but I mean, the Wasteland almost turns into worker placement. You're fighting over those, and maybe you have different spots in there. You're fighting over the prime spots. You're trying to get in. If
Or-
you know if you're about to deliver, you're about to lose that prime spot, and
Right.
someone else is going to take it, and you're rolling to see how many resources you get. So I think that press your luck plus a little bit of worker placement in there is really interesting.
And I got to say, I love the idea of having a worker placement revolving around just a normal playing card side
Right.
card, and you're all
And everyone's
playing.
I was
fighting
about
for
to
that
say,
one
I think you
spot.
should grow the Wasteland.
I love the compactness of like
I do too. I like that.
it's just confined, and it just makes it a different experience than
Yeah.
most.
I even like
I
maybe
played.
even leaving your mech there for multiple turns and like doubling
Yeah.
down.
Well, that's what you
And-
do.
Yeah.
Like, if you have the easier contracts to complete, you leave 2 mechs in the Wasteland all the time, and you leave 2 mechs to complete easy
Sure.
contracts.
Yeah.
But then when you want to complete a hard one, you have to pull a mech out to complete that, and then there's that decision of, oh, do I pull a mech out? Do I keep going for little ones? And I think it makes the Wasteland more interesting. I think it makes a lot of your decision-making more
Well,
interesting.
the longer you stay in, you run the risk of getting trapped.
Right.
Or
Right,
if
yeah,
you change
there's pressure luck, yeah.
the guy, the whatever guy, the
I like the idea of
attacker.
resources.
Right.
Just
You might get
like there being
looted.
a
You might
limit
get
to how many
trapped.
resources.
Right.
How long
it
do you want
has
to
as
stay
well.
in there? Just so many interesting
Or
choices.
if the
open up.
raiders show up, they
Raiders.
the raiders show up, they take 1 resource from you for every mech that you have in the Wasteland. So now being in the Wasteland and you're
You're
just
pressing
stuff
your
like
luck in
that.
so
yeah.
many different ways.
Yeah.
which
And
is way
and
fun.
and then I think you make that this game and it becomes a lot more. There's a lot more
Exciting,
fun.
yeah.
There's a lot more exciting, and there's a lot more choices where you feel like you're making an interesting choice, choosing between a 70% success rate and a 60% success rate is a
know what
lot
you're
more
gonna do.
interesting
Yeah.
than choosing between
Yeah.
a 100% success rate and a 0% success rate. So-
Which, to go back to one of your points, I don't know if you've mentioned it on camera. I do think that this game has a way right now in its current iteration to solve. Like, it's easy if you
It's-
stare
it
at
can
the
be-
state of the board to figure out what is most advantageous for me in this moment. Especially because even with raiders coming out and you don't have any raiders, you know that, okay, one of these contracts is going to work best for me right now, and I just need to figure it out. And then I figure it out. And then if a raider comes out later in the game, I'm still
Right.
okay
That's the
because
trump
I
card.
can.
You just
Because
Yeah,
if there's
I trumped
no
everything in the
right,
game.
if there's no like ambiguity in that decision making, then it just becomes something you solve.
Right.
And then the more you play it, the easier it is to solve it. And then you give huge advantages to people who have played it more and more.
Yeah.
People will, know sooner than later that once you get ahead, you can stay ahead, and it becomes a little more difficult to play. I think that the last little bit of feedback that we have is pretty straightforward. One way or the other, you kind of got to lose the awards at the end. They just feel bad. They might help balance the game. They might open up different avenues of play, But when you're sitting at the end of a turn and you go, who has the most victory points? Oh, you're winning already because
Let's give
victory
them
points are
more.
the only thing that matters? Here's something more.
Yeah.
And it could be more victory points. The fact that there were victory points on those rewards cards
Yeah.
was crazy to me, because now you're just getting rewarded with victory points for having the most victory points. And games shouldn't have a mechanic that lets the leader leave everyone behind. Games should have a mechanic that lets the person in back catch up. Otherwise, you get scenarios like we had with Adam and Colin, where Adam was clearly winning and having fun, and Colin was clearly losing and not going to be able to catch up and wasn't enjoying it anymore and didn't want to play. And, and I kind of got to that point too, where when we kind of figured out the game, I felt I figured it out to an extent where I'm like, oh, we just need to either spend hours meticulously planning each turn, or we kind of just need to play and keep killing the raiders and just kind of see what happens.
Well,
and so I would just avoid, if you need that to balance the game for some reason, fine, find another way to do it other than just obviously handing the person who appears to be winning more winnings.
Well, and like from my perspective, the way I play games is I try to dive into whatever character I'm playing. I try to play the strategy that's given to me, and if that strategy is unable to be accomplished, I'm going to get frustrated. And that was a way that I got frustrated while playing this. And especially if you're rewarding people when there's no way I could do anything, there's no way I can interact with Adam directly to take any of his stuff. If you want to add something in that can, where I can raid Adam and start trying to get rewards from him or anything, but there's just not. So you're just watching somebody pull ahead even more, and it's just from someone who's in last place or second to last, you just know this is over, and like please, whoever's gonna
Right.
complete the last objective, like just take it.
To
I
finish
don't
it
I
up,
don't
yeah.
care.
So I wanted to recap really quick those 3 problems that we've noticed, because I think that whether or not you take any of the solutions that we've suggested, we do feel like the wasteland needs to be more prominent in the game. We want to feel more of that. We also feel like the raiders need to be fixed in some way because they're too powerful in either direction, and then the awards just don't feel great to do, giving it to the leader.
Yeah.
That aside, though, I wanted to say, from my personal experience, if you can solve some of those issues, I see a lot of interesting choices. I like the theme.
Definitely.
I like the way to do the game. I enjoyed my experience of it because I did feel like I had a chance to compete with Adam. So I felt like that was there, but it wasn't across the board available to everybody,
Well,
which is part of the
I,
issue.
I would like to point out that I wasn't like upset because I didn't feel that I had the chance to win. I was actively disengaged because I didn't feel the choices were interesting. And I, at one point, just decided I want to make interesting choices or just do something different to try and increase my enjoyment for this game. Because the way that it's just kind of playing out it's all just kind of plays out. It's all just the raiders are going to do this, you're going to go fight them, you're not, and it just kind of, to me, it just kind of obviously played out. And so that's what disengaged me more.
Yeah.
Not that I didn't feel like I had a chance. It's that the effort and what I'd have to do to play the game just didn't seem like a lot of fun to me. It felt more like, maybe it was that I didn't feel like I had a chance because I felt I was more at the whims of the game and what
Right.
cards appeared, and I didn't have enough like effective choices to make or some place to go and say, all right, I'm losing, so screw it.
And
Push
I
everything
wonder-
in the middle, bet it all on black, one roll of the die, maybe I can get back in this thing. That's interesting. But I just saw that, like, okay, this is going to kind of play out, and
it's going to keep
and,
further
yeah.
and further get out of my reach.
Right.
But I think that, to me, what that says, that if I had this experience and you had that experience, it seems like Adam and I are on a similar playing field of what experience we had, and you two are on a closer playing field of what experience you had. And if you can have those two perspectives in this game, it says to me that those variable player powers may have the potential that
Right.
they, depending on the way the card draws out, it locks in certain strategies to take. And it happened to work out that Adam and I had
Yeah.
the player powers that were most advantageous in this game, the way it played out, and you guys got stuck with the ones that you had.
Yeah. As we've been talking
I
about
wanted
it,
to
I
do
did
contracts so badly. I wanted to be able to do something with my character and have it cheaper and be able to do contract every I was just blocked from it, and there was nothing I could do other than go for Raiders, which is why at the end of the game, I started just trying. You know what? I'm just going to go for the contract because that's what this guy is supposed to do, and
Right.
I want to experience what this guy does.
I think another big thing that I liked about the game, this will be quick, I felt for such a small footprint, it played like a really big game. And
Definitely.
especially if you force people in the wasteland and it's more worker placement, it feels like a huge game in a little box, and that's wonderful.
Yeah.
So I think you got a lot going here.
I think overall, yeah, you do have a lot going here. There are some issues with just some balancing. It's really balancing issues, to be honest with you. Looking at this game, everything can be fixed by balancing. The Raiders are just too overpowered. The Wasteland's not interesting enough, and the rewards just feel bad. But everything else is like it's great. Like I want to play it, I want to enjoy it, everything else about the game is great. There's just balancing issues that are going to make certain strategies overpowered. And like Tyson was saying, as the cards come out, that becomes more and more apparent depending on what you have. I think you could also just go a long way by losing the character powers. You don't need to give people variable powers. I think you're doing that just because it's something that's done a lot in games, and I think there's a lot to having to balance that because you're building 4 asymmetrical games at that point. We weren't all playing the same game.
Which that
And I think you simplify things a lot just by removing those powers and
That
try
was
playing it
at the
with just a
very
level
least,
playing
that was
field.
going to be my suggestion is if you want variable player powers, that's great. But first play without them, get the
Yeah.
game set in its core on a level playing field, and then try that balancing. Because I think that that's exactly how I felt about it, was that, yeah, these are interesting and unique. And of course, I don't have the data. I don't know how many playtests have said that they're balanced or they're not balanced. But my first impression is that there are some, in certain games, there are some powers that are going to play better for that game than others.
But yeah, overall, I think you got a great game here with a lot of potential. Just has a few balancing issues and a few issues with maybe it's really just all comes down to balancing, to be honest with you. And maybe either the hidden information you either have more hidden information or just less hidden information. If you're not going to really hide it, then don't hide it. But other than that, great game. Thank you very much, and keep up the good work.